All right guys, today we are getting the Unitronic Dogbone mount installed. We'll be going through it step by step and comparing the OEM one to this unit to show you how much different it is. This is a big piece of the puzzle, and I think we're gonna really have some positive performance gains, especially from a stop with this unit. So we're looking to improve our 60-foot time, our 1/8 mile, and our 1/4 mile time, really just by being able to plant the power to the ground better. Follow along and we'll show you step by step. All right guys, underway with the Unitronic Dogbone arm install. Well, the mount and the arm. First things first, we got to get the old arm out and we got to take these mounts out. There's a couple ways to do that, and we'll show you how to do it the way that I prefer, and we'll explain the way that most do. But we'll get started with removing these 3 bolts. We've got a 21mm holding it in the arm and the mount, and then 2 18s that hold the arm to the transmission. We will need to disassemble the OEM arm because we're going to be using the front portion of it that mounts to the transmission, but the rest of it is going in the bin. All right, so these 2 18s will come out. And don't be too alarmed, but you're going to get some engine movement. Not too much, but enough. So this is, again, the arm that prevents this motion. And when you accelerate, the engine rocks backwards, sending the bottom of it forward, the top of it back, and this arm is deflecting. And so down here, this is just a rubber bushing that has a ton of play. So the unit that we're replacing it with is going to be a lot more stiff than that. Now we're going to go ahead and blast out this 21mm. And this is wedged in between 2 pieces of rubber, and it can get stuck sometimes. This being a new car, it should come right out, but if you wiggle it, it'll pop out, and you can see the dust and debris here that was there and was really kind of causing a sandy, gritty situation where you need a little bit of love to come out. So there's a couple ways to get these OEM mounts out. One way, which a lot of folks recommend to do, is use a pry bar and pry it out. It is just rubber with a plastic outer ring, and so it's possible, doable. Another way is to use a small reciprocating saw or sawzall and just get through it. You can do the same with a chisel. But there are tools out there. This particular one was for a mount kit that was available in the past. But ultimately, we can pull the mounts down from the top. So this tool, this top plate will go on top, and then we'll pull the mounts through it. This is smaller than the hole and the mounts, just barely, but as it pushes on the mounts, it'll be pushing on the most rigid part of it. So we'll go ahead and get this placed up on top of the original upper mount, and definitely make sure that it's in the right location. And as you look up through the mount hole, you'll see the threads for it, and then you'll see the plate that we just put up there with its threads located dead center. Now with this, we can position it so that it's right here and actually putting force onto our subframe. And as we pull that plate down, those mounts should drop into this basket. One is out, and the other one is almost. We had a catastrophic failure after 5 years of using that tool, which really, I'm happy it lasted that long. So now we are gonna go about doing it the way that I don't love doing it. We're gonna go ahead and cut a slit into this bushing, and then we'll be able to pop it the rest of the way out. And voila. Well, wasn't that easy, Jimmy? All right, so now we've got to get this part swapped over. This is the orientation that they both sit, and we've got two 18 millimeters on either side here that we're gonna need to disengage. And once this is loose, we'll take the bolt and simply move it over. Now, we're not going to tighten it up all the way until it's in position so that we can tighten that bushing where it's going to be oriented on the arm. Because if we tighten it in the wrong orientation, it's going to be sprung when it's bolted up. We'll go ahead and set this guy to the side and set these over here. Now, the way that they recommend putting this in is pressing it up and recommend using a PVC pipe to do so. We're going to use some press tools in lieu of that, but we'll get this upper part put in place. You want to make sure that the window lines up with the window in the subframe. We'll show you what we mean by that. So here is where the Dogbone arm is going to come through. So we just need to make sure that this guy is in the right position. And then as we get it in place, if we need to adjust it, we can. We'll go ahead and get a plate and mallet. So now that we're getting close, we'll go ahead and get it flushed up to the subframe and then get our PVC or our press tool to get it the rest of the way up there. After dealing with this particular unit, not the Dogbone mount, but the Golf R with the 401 transmission, and things being a little bit more chunky down here. On our GTI, this was a breeze. We popped up the sway bar, we're able to put everything in through the top and put it in through the bottom, easy peasy. This was a little bit more challenging because of our space constraints. Tried to pull things through, saw how that went. And then getting it pushed back up, it was a bit of a fighter. Definitely recommend going down from the top if you can. The easiest way to accomplish that is really just dropping the subframe a little bit. It's as simple as a few bolts, but this way will work just fine too. Just make sure that you've got that PVC pipe laying around, and it definitely doesn't hurt having something that you can press it up with rather than using a mallet to get it into place. Both work, but I like the control that you get with a press. Next, we're gonna go ahead and get the bottom section of it in, and then we can continue with our installation. So to show how this ultimately would go together if you were to do it from the top, you would get everything in place much like this, and as you start getting it pressed in, being that it doesn't have the bushing in it, you've got a lot of flexibility. Now, we still have the challenge of getting this lip around here. There's a couple different ways to do that. Screwdriver typically will work okay. Just be gentle with it because you don't want to crack it. After we get it past that point, it'll press up the rest of the way, no problem, and then we can get the bushing put in along with the mounting plate. All right, so we will go ahead and put some pressure here and gently start. Well, we may want to see about using our flat plate again and pressing onto this, which will give us a more consistent shot. So what we were using, as we don't have a PVC pipe hanging out and we're not as prepared as we could have been with our Home Depot runs. We're gonna reuse this tool again, and we just need to get it in place and centered, and it should be good to go. Down is up. But we need room on this side to be able to manipulate the screwdriver. So we'll go ahead and get this in and put some pressure on it, and then we can start pressing up, and it should take it upon itself to find its home. Now we'll go ahead and move here and get things straightened out. Now, when we tighten everything down, it's naturally going to be pulling these into their perfected position because it will be centered around the Dogbone arm. But as you can see, we've got a little bit of a gap between the two. We'll get that closed up by centering the bottom one so that it's at its proper position. And then we'll get the arm in, tighten it down, and it'll be sandwiched where we want it. So now we can put the bushing and the mounting plate in. There is a locating part on each one of these bushings, upper and lower. Just make sure that they are sitting in the proper position within your bushing housing. And it should look just like that. Now, take mind that when this is in here, it is held in by friction, but if there's any lube or anything happens, it can fall out. It's not gonna hurt it functionally, but it may make it a lot less pretty than it currently is. So now we've got our Dogbone arm here, and we just need to make sure that it's in the right orientation so that this part that doesn't have the marks from our bolts will be facing up towards the transmission. You'll know because the rear part is more elevated than the front. Also, the bottom side houses the Unitronic logo. Now this will go in between the two bushings, and it should go in with relative ease, much like that. And we can get the bolt started. I would not recommend tightening this down until we have everything else ready to go. Now, we'll see here that the transmission is sitting a good 10 millimeters, or 8 millimeters, 6 millimeters. Forward of where we need this. We can pull it down into place a little bit, but not as much as we really want or need to. So we're gonna get some leverage and move the engine and transmission back so we can get those bolts in, and we'll get everything torqued down. So there are a couple locations that you can put some force on these transmissions. Keep in mind, any of this, don't use too much leverage or apply too much force because these cases are aluminum, and if you put too much on them, you can crack them. So there is a point here that we should be able to get just enough movement out of it where we'll be able to get this lined up. Alternatively, you can always use jack to move it up. So we'll actually probably lift the back of the assembly up since we've got a transmission jack here, and that'll put us right where we want to be. We're going to make sure that we're on the further back part of this transmission, and we're using a rubber block so that we don't damage anything. Now, by doing this, being that our mounts are centered on the engine and transmission, this will allow it to rock back where we want it to go. So as we go up, you'll see these holes start to align, and now we're where we want to be. Okay, so now with these bolts installed, we've got to torque down the bolts that go into the transmission, the bolt that goes through the subframe bushing, and then we'll tighten the arm to bushing mount. I would always recommend that you start with torquing down the bolts that go through the transmission, because when you do this one first, what can happen is it can cause it to kind of shift as you tighten it, and that will cause it to have a leaning tendency to one side, which again will leave this sprung a little bit, which we don't want. So we'll torque these down, followed by getting this guy tightened up, and then finally take care of our bone to bushing mount. All right, we are good there. Is it recording? Yeah. Okay. So these two bolts get torqued to 50 Newton meters plus 90 degrees. The new bolt that we're putting in here gets torqued to 100 Newton meters, and this will get torqued to 100 Newton meters as well. There we go. 100 Newton meters, and everything here is installed and torqued down. Now, this is going to help us considerably with keeping this powertrain in line and not moving around like it has been, especially on our dyno sessions. At this point, with this particular unit, I can say with quite a bit of certainty that even if we try, we're not going to be able to rock this engine back a whole lot. So let me grab a pry bar and see what we can do. All right, so with the OEM bushing, we can, and we should have done this for you before, but with the OEM bushing, putting a pry bar here like this and rocking the engine, you can generate quite a bit of movement. And as you can see here, the only thing moving is my pry bar. It's flexing. Right now, the engine and transmission is very solidly planted, and I think that next time we hit the dyno, you'll be able to see as well as us that this guy's not moving anywhere, under load or deceleration. So we're all finished up, and we've got to go give this thing a road test. All right, we've got the Unitronic Dogbone mount and bushings installed, and everything is torqued down to specifications. Looks great, and as we know from our previous experiences with it, we can expect that it's going to perform great. So we're going to go ahead and get this out on the road, see how it feels, and we'll report back with any changes in NVH, because I know on a lot of Facebook groups, a lot of you guys were really concerned about too much NVH from something like this. And as I was mentioning, this is one of the more tame ones. It's got a lot of forgiveness to it, but it's also very stiff. So we'll report back, give you some info on that, and see you in the next video.